This is The Culture.
What's going on, guys? We are back for another episode of the Cinema Wave podcast, and this week we are talking about Sofia Coppola's Priscilla. Sorry, Sophia. I'm so sorry for that intro. But basically, we are talking about the movie that she has just released. It is about Priscilla Presley. It is about Elvis Presley. And this is based on Priscilla Presley's own book, Elvis and Me. And this follows a intimate period piece based on their two lives together, a lot of their home life, a lot of their relationship, and really goes in deep of some of the inner workings of what was going on at home behind his persona and his appearance to the public eye. So we're going to dive in right to it. So Liz, over to you.
Yes. What a great intro.
That was probably the worst intro I've ever made ever.
Okay. Well, getting right into it. My first stake is I loved Priscilla. I'm a huge Sofia Coppola fan. I've been for a little while now, a couple of years. I think her first film I ever saw was probably Lost in Translation, and that is still one of my favorites. But I thought Priscilla was beautiful. The production was incredible. Cailee Spaeny is getting a ton of credit for it right now for her performance, and a lot of eyes are kind of on her, and now I know why. Her performance was just breathtaking and a very different choice than I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a little bit more commercialized, but she really kept it human, and made Priscilla just kind of like a regular young girl who all of a sudden gets swept up in this life of Hollywood and like fame, and how is she surviving it when she actually loves this person, and they clearly love their like fame a little bit more. But I thought it was really great. I thought it's kind of the front runner right now for me. I think there's one other film that I've seen that it's on the same level as this year, but so far this is one of my favorites. Yeah. What about you, Zach? What do you think? First thoughts?
Yeah, first thoughts. Immediately when the teaser came out, I was really invested in what Coppola was trying to do with the approach to the period and Priscilla's, her change in her persona just around this huge force that is Elvis, and the Americana that comes with him. And he is such a staple to everything that we know about that period. And he is really encapsulating that period and what it means to be a man, to be a dynamic performer. And his whole aura at that time was so magnetic for so many people. It's always interesting to wonder what it was like at home. And that's what they really focused on, was how his relationship with Priscilla ultimately changed her, and it evolved her, matured her rapidly throughout the film.
Yeah.
And I think that Coppola was a great fit for this, to work on this project. And I think when you're talking about a woman like Priscilla Presley, and she has her own memoir about it, it's a really good piece to give into not only informing but educating people on what it was like to be a woman of that time period, and then attached to somebody as big as Elvis.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with what you're saying. I also think that this is one of the first pieces of at least art that I've seen attached to Elvis that highlights their age difference. I feel like a lot of people didn't know how young she was. I didn't know it until it was kind of like foreshadowed in like the trailer.
Yeah.
And I didn't know going in how they were going to handle that. Like, was it just going to be their younger selves and focusing on how they first met? Or if I even thought maybe as it transitioned into like them getting older and then after having like a kid together, were they going to change out the actress and have Cailee Spaeny be played by somebody a little bit older looking? Because I mean, going from that age range of like 14 to
I think our mid-20s or early 30s.
Yeah, probably. I mean, that's just a big age gap to do and have it be done well.
Yeah.
And I I don't know about you, but I was blown away by the transition that they did of making her look younger to older. I mean, in the beginning, they have her wearing these kind of like baby doll dresses, making her look much younger than Cailee probably actually is. And then the thing that I loved is they didn't do a hard change of like 14 and now we're 30. They did it like, okay, we're 14. Now we're like 18. Now we're like 25. And it was just really beautifully done how they did that through not only Cailee's like performance and her energy that she was giving of maturing, but through the costume, makeup, hair. Oh my God. I mean, it was beautiful and it looked like it was actually done to a T, and they really took inspiration from pictures of her and said like, we're going to get this done right. We're not going to kind of botch Priscilla's image. We're going to make it like a homage to her. Yeah.
And I think that kind of goes hand in hand with how Sofia has such an understanding of women characters in her movies. I mean, she has a decorated resume: Lost in Translation, Virgin Suicides, Marie Antoinette. She's a big, long-time collaborator with Kirsten Dunst too. So they have a great relationship together, and what it means to just tell real stories about women, and especially with this being a true story rooted in its memoirs, they figured out a way to elevate her maturity and her coming of age when it wasn't overbearing. So it was a lot of that through wardrobe, through her environment, through her relationship. Throughout the film, she starts to kind of dig her feet in and become more independent. And she realizes she has to break out of certain parts of their relationship and go on her own. And I think this was just such a great opportunity for Coppola to excel in this field. I feel like there were very few women directors and directors in general that could tell this story the way that she did. And it proved to be a very entertaining and complex watch. You know, it's she made it almost a character study as well with Spaeny in the role. Yeah, I think Coppola, at least from when I've seen all of her films, I think she just loves to hone in on that like melancholy youth feeling of like transporting her audience back into their own minds of like, oh, when I was younger, especially like her female audience. Like when I was watching her like paint her nails, I was like, oh my God, like laying on my stomach, like kicking my feet back and forth. Like what a vibe that was growing up. And so I just loved that in the beginning, she really leaned into the youthfulness of Priscilla and let her be a younger version of herself and not trying to force, just really show that she was a young girl when they met. And not transition it into like, oh, she was young, but like mature for her age. It was like, no, she was still a young girl who was like hard eyes in love with Elvis and was kind of getting swept away with the romance and love story of it all, that she wasn't aware. And I mean, nobody would be at that age aware of what she was actually getting herself into by partnering up and marrying somebody who was this big in the public eye. I also think Coppola probably has like a little bit of a connection to that story of growing up and being in the public eye, which again, I think anybody else could have done a good job on this script, but I just don't think they would have handled it so delicately like she did, because she probably has that strong connection to the story. Yeah. And like I said, she just does a really nice job of having that undertone of melancholy and kind of loneliness in all of her films. That I think was needed to tell this story, because that's kind of the overall theme throughout, is just Priscilla fighting to not feel lonely when really there are people all around them at all times, but she just feels alone. I mean, especially in some of the scenes that they are like locked in their bedroom and she's clearly just stuck in the house by herself. Like she's not able to talk to people. They tell her like, oh, don't go near the fence. Like you're putting on a show for people. I think it was a really interesting just insight onto sometimes it's super lonely for these people that have all the eyes on them. And I think that's like what she was trying to do there was with at least isolating Priscilla from the public eye, like you were kind of saying, of just how once she kind of gave herself over to Elvis and was okay with giving herself up and yeah, I want to be with you, she didn't realize the things that would come with that.
Yeah.
And being so isolated and being so cut off from her own personal choices at that point, because now the biggest theme I think of the movie for her was now whatever you do is doing it in Elvis's eyes or under Elvis's magnifying glass of, you know, you have to be understanding that people will perceive you as a bad person if it's bad for Elvis or if it's bad for his image. So
or bad for his own taste. Because
Yeah.
I feel like this also showed that he made a lot of choices on how she dressed, how she looked, her hair. So it was like make a good impression for Elvis's image, but also for Elvis's like interest also. Make sure that he's interested in you.
Right. It was manipulation with, okay, you're Elvis's girl now. It's not your Priscilla, it's your Elvis's girl.
Yeah.
You are a commodity to the public eye, to Elvis himself at points. And I think that it was really interesting that Coppola decided to start it off as this budding romantic gesture. He starts as an officer and he's like, you know, sir, can I court your daughter? I would love to talk with her more. So it starts off very formal and very Prince Charming in a way. And then he is Elvis Presley. So who was to say no at that point in time? And then once she gives himself over to him, it begins nice, but then it starts to dive into, you know, there is more to this than meets the eye. I need to kind of diminish myself to be Elvis's commodity and Elvis's supporting role in his public persona. So I think that was great. And then I just think that there's, with the abuse too, it was really interesting just what it told to us, like with, I can't imagine being in that limelight of with Elvis Presley and then having to
Absolutely not.
Yeah. It would just be so hard to imagine myself in those shoes of my image and how to conduct myself. And then also letting my husband kind of do his own thing at the end of the day. And you're kind of just, you have to accept that at that point in time. So the Coppola does that really well. She literally, most of the film, Priscilla is alone in Graceland or she's alone with her friends. And then when she is with Elvis, it's usually through the lens of other people are watching, whether it's his band or his family. And then when they are alone, he can't even give himself up to her completely as a man or just a husband or anyone in general of just, I need to be here for her in this moment, you know?
Yeah, no, it's always her sitting there, seeing what he needs, seeing like, okay, what can I do for you now that you're home? But back to Coppola's direction of, I mean, I don't know if it's how the book was. I haven't read the book, but I'm assuming it starts off very much like infatuated with each other and like it's just a budding romance. But then also from a director point of view, that's so needed because you need your audience to care not just about one of the characters, but both of them. Because if it's going to be a romance story, if you right off the bat have one of the people be kind of like not likable, then everyone's going to be like, oh, like break up, like get over this. But I mean, Priscilla and Elvis, they're so iconic. They're like one of the iconic love stories too. So I think Coppola really needed to kind of like rope in her audience of rooting for them almost in a way, or maybe not rooting, but at least having like that, like giddy young love giddiness feeling of like, oh, like, yeah, I hope it works out for them. And then all of a sudden you start to see the things unraveling in front of your eyes as well as Priscilla's eyes of, oh my God, wait, maybe this isn't such a love story after all.
Yeah.
And another great thing about Coppola's direction is she totally could have made this over dramatic and really gone from a budding romance to a dark abuse story. And I don't think she did that at all. I think she really kept to the source material and made it a very fine line of like letting the audience walk away and deciding how they want to, what they want to take away from Elvis's story, essentially. she wasn't saying like Elvis was an abuser. She was more just saying this is what Priscilla came out with in her story. Now you get to walk away as the audience member having just watched it and say how you feel.
Yeah. I think there was just so much to unpack in the movie, and there's so many layers to the performance, to just how she kind of set up the story, what she chose to include in the story and focus on, and then how do we dramatically tell this and emphasize that this is about not a romance but a loneliness love story, and how it evolved into a spiral of I can't accept this anymore, and this isn't good for me, and I know that he is the biggest entertainer on the planet, but it's okay for me to stand up for myself, and it's okay for me to break off from that, even though everything else is telling me not to. So I think that is really compelling in Coppola's work, and she does a great job, even in like Lost in Translation. That movie is hinging on this potential romance that's about to happen, but it chooses to not do that.
Yeah.
And it chooses, I was reading about others' reviews on it and just their thoughts on that movie, and how it's a lot about how they have this bond together and figuring out themselves through each other and their self-reflection, and they feel so lost from both of their identities that they have this really deep emotion for each other, and they find themselves through that, but it's not necessarily romantic. So Coppola is a very experienced director in navigating these gray area relationships, I guess, of it doesn't always have to be these really jubilant and like my heart is bursting for these people in a romance. Like that's also just not how romance works. She gives a very realistic take on stuff, and then with this, it's like you're a rock star. He has such a huge ego. He has such a energy to him that she just can't be attached to it anymore, and she realizes it's just not good for her. So there's just so much to unpack with
I
this
know.
movie.
But this is a total side note, but you saw Past Lives, right?
Yes.
I feel like Lost in Translation and Past Lives have like the same,
very close,
very same vibe-ish. Past Lives is a little bit more like romantic in my mind, but I feel like they have the same undertones.
Yes.
But anyways, so Coppola, I feel that she I also think she's just she's not gonna do one of those big blockbuster, the biggest and best script ever. I feel like all of her films, she's searching for like a feeling.
Yes.
Or she's just trying to shed light on a life without like it's not for everybody. Some people don't love her films. Some people have said that they find them a little dull, that she doesn't make big choices on characters, that she leaves everything in like that wishy-washy area. But I just think that's a great take, because sometimes your audience doesn't want to be beaten over the head with like what your opinion is. Sometimes they just want to see something beautiful and walk away and be able to talk it amongst themselves.
Yeah. And a lot of people like these cookie cutter, straightforward narratives.
Oh yeah. Some people love it. Some people want to be like spoon fed. But then I think there's a very small group, which I think is growing, of people that like to see something and then walk away feeling one way, because then it makes them want to go watch it again to be like, ooh, but did I actually get that, or did I miss some things?
Yeah, and I think a lot of her movies go over people's heads sometimes with just how she explores these human emotions and stuff, and it doesn't have to always make sense to us the first time. I actually read some comments. Yeah, exactly.
It might never make sense.
I read some comments and some people were like, it actually made more sense after the third viewing, like talking about Lost in Translation at least. And they kept watching it, but they realized that she's exploring some part of our emotions that is not stereotypical to people when they watch romantic movies. Yeah. So I respect her for that. And I would like a little bit more of a challenge going into some of these movies. And she does that really well. Because if we're just getting a straightforward, and Past Lives is the same as this, if we're just getting a straightforward, you know, I can't love you at this point in time. And like, oh, well, I get the girl at the end. And then like, that's it. We've seen that before. So it's what can we do with something new that she can offer? And Virgin Suicides is another great example.
Yeah, oh my God.
You're not expecting half of that film to happen.
No.
So,
and I think a lot of it comes from also Coppola. I'm pretty sure I've read this somewhere. I don't remember where. It was a while ago that she said, she was like, I find it hard to wrap up endings because like life doesn't end and all these stories are about real people and their story. And it's not just like, oh, the film's done. So that's it, everybody, wrap it up. She's like, there's so much more to do. And so to end a film, it's not ending that person's story. It's just ending this moment that we're captivating. Yeah. And I agree. I mean, I think like sometimes endings are like the hardest thing if you're trying to show a real nuanced piece of art. If you're doing a typical story, then yeah, you know when to end because it's like, okay, the good people won, or the guy or the girl and the guy got together now, and so finish it. And I think all of her films end not really beautifully bow tied. And so some people don't love it, but you know what? I do. So whatever.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily for everyone, and that's okay. I think this movie can be for everyone, though, if they really perk their ears up a little bit and understand that this is not going to be a relationship that they're used to, or they're going to discover things that they didn't know about Elvis and Priscilla.
Yeah, like if you're a huge Elvis fan, you're going to go in kind of like, wait,
a little bias.
What's happening? And like, why are we, especially if you loved the other Elvis movie, I feel like you're going to go into this and be like, what? He didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah, I know. Not enough Tom Hanks in this movie, right?
Oh, God, Jesus.
I know. Well, that's another big,
we'll get into that. But
we're going to get into
I do have a question for you.
Yes.
Do you think that, obviously, Cailee Spaeny, incredible performance. Do you think this film would have done as well if her performance wasn't so good? Because like we've talked about, like, carving that story of like going from youth to adult, having these intimate moments of like loneliness where she's just sitting by herself. I feel like that's not really necessarily Coppola's directing. It's more of Spaény's performance.
Yeah.
Or do you think it's like goes hand in hand, good director, great performance, like mesh together?
I think it's both. Okay. And I think because Coppola is definitely setting the stage for how is this woman going to be perceived and what was she like at home? So I think with Spaeny, she actually shows a maturity throughout the film, and her performance is so good that you do feel like she's entrapped in this situation, which she is to a point, not literally in jail, but she has a choice to leave, but she understands what some of the consequences might be, or standing up for herself. And you can identify with her ability to feel isolated at points, and then other points it gets extreme. And some other points are unrelatable because it's with Elvis, but it's also that, you know, a lot of people know what it's like to not reach a partner, or to have problems with just what your partner thinks of you or what you think of them, and then just how the public might perceive you, or like friends and family might perceive you, or what is the right move to do in these situations. And I think she really brought a lot of empathetic elements into this, as well as building on everything that Priscilla wrote. And I think the direction also enhanced that because it built an environment for her to flourish in and for her to mature in the midst of a toxic environment.
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. I also think, I mean, it was just such a complex performance, honestly. There was so much happening while like nothing was happening. And as her first big like leading role, I was just blown away by it. I thought she brought so much to the table that a lot of people maybe weren't expecting for her. I think people were more prepared of like, okay, like she's going to do like a first leading role. Let's like, she'll have some good emotional arcs, but let's see what happens. And I think that she just was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. But then I also think Coppola is so great at just directing young female actors that she just has been, Coppola I feel like has been training her whole life just to be like, okay, this is what we're going to do. Like, let's get this done. And I think Cailee Spaeny, I think she's going to be nominated. I don't know if she'll win.
I hope she gets nominated. Definitely.
I think she definitely will.
Yeah. She's definitely in the running for winners. Like you said, I don't know if she's going to win necessarily.
I have to see a few other films first that I've been hearing, but I think this is definitely going to get her a nom. She won Best Actress Award at Venice Film Festival for this.
Huge.
Right off the bat. So, that award alone, too, I think made a lot of people come and start looking at this film. I think in the beginning, it was like, oh, another Coppola film. All right. Some people will love it. Some people won't. But once that award got announced, I think people were like, "Oh,
everyone was like, okay, there's a lot more buzz behind this than just the story." And a lot of people were like, it's also kind of with the times too, about how there were these very big male entertainers and that were not everything that meets the eye, and a lot of them have had bad pasts and bad personalities with women in their lives, especially from that era, the 60s and the 70s, and Hollywood also the same thing. So when this plot was dropped, I know a lot of people were probably thinking, oh, is this going to be another situation where it's just oh, it's very straightforward and
like another biopic.
Are they just going to dramatically paint Elvis as a bad guy completely? Which I don't think it was really. I think it was just very complex, and I'm going to talk about more of Elvis's performance in a bit, but just how it was complex, and there's a lot of duality involved with. We all love Elvis as the entertainer, but there is also parts of his personality we don't agree with and condone.
Yeah.
So I think that is what they explore, and it's not a disservice to Elvis's personality or his charisma or his image necessarily. I just think that there's layers of Elvis that should be analyzed as well as his music and his legacy. So yeah.
No, I agree. I think something that I'm seeing in the notes that you put is that she didn't listen to any Elvis music to get into character.
Yeah, I found that in part of her interview that she didn't use Elvis music, and she rather just watched a lot of movies and other 60s period music to get into the era more so.
I get that.
The character.
Which I agree. She doesn't need to listen to any Elvis's music because she's not getting into that I highly doubt Priscilla was playing Elvis music when she's home alone waiting for him to come home. Yeah,
and it's half abusive half the time. She's not feeling adoration over
No, she's
somebody.
also mad because he brought her over to live with him, but then he was MIA and on tour half the time. But then he also wouldn't let her get a job. He wouldn't let her go places because she was attached to his image and he didn't want her putting out the wrong image. But here she is, this young girl trying to figure out her life under his shadow.
Right.
So I it was just a very complex performance from her, and I thought it was I would rewatch it again just to see little things that I missed.
Yeah. I also found in her interview that she was basically recommended by Kirsten Dunst, who is the longtime collaborator with Sofia Coppola.
Yeah,
so they are always working together, and for Kirsten Dunst to see her work in Alex Garland's Civil War, she said that she loved that movie. She saw Spaeny in that, and she recommended her and referred her to Coppola. And just to get your hat in the running for this role and for that director absolutely sends you into the stratosphere as an actor. And then for it to be your first leading role performance on top of that, what better foundation to build a performance on that you have a masterwork of Coppola and a good script and a good story, but then also the notoriety of Elvis as well. That being said, I think there's a tremendous amount of pressure that comes with that.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine the pressure.
Yeah.
The one thing that I do think, coming from an acting point of view, is that because you could say that Priscilla isn't necessarily the leading role in the world of Elvis. So she could lean into that of okay, this isn't about me. It's about Elvis. And then really it's just Coppola putting the camera on Spaeny at the end of the day. Mentally, she's not so like we can talk about like Austin Butler's performance of Elvis. I feel like that's a little bit more intense because you also have to be the showman and like put on the performance of Elvis.
Yeah.
While Spaeny, it was just more of that pressure of delivering an honest performance while somebody else is playing Elvis, like the charismatic person, and she just needs to be honest to Priscilla's story. She doesn't need to show and make everybody think that because I feel like when you're doing a biopic, it can often be like, oh, do they remind you of that person? And like, do they sell it as that person? And nobody was like, she doesn't look like Priscilla, because who cares if she actually looks like her or not?
Right.
I mean, I do think she looked like her, similar to like the hair and makeup, but actually I don't
not so much, but yes, yeah.
But I think that pressure was really off of her in this film, which is great, because it wasn't about how do you embody her? Are your hands looking like her? Because I think some actors get so caught up in the physicality of embodying that person that they care less about giving an honest opinion to that person's emotional storyline.
Absolutely.
And so I think she really focused less on the physicality and was like, I'm going to be real to what Priscilla was feeling and also what she probably would feel in those situations.
I think she was really good at articulating that voice of hers. And I'm assuming she went into the book a little bit. I think there was more of that in the interview I didn't really touch on, but using that as a stepping stone and a starting point for her to develop Priscilla's voice. Because I think it's like what you were talking about is, if I don't physically embody the person in real life, I might as well articulate what they're trying to say in these moments to the best of my ability, and then also trusting in the director to do that as well, if that's what they're going for. Marie Antoinette is not a movie that might be historically accurate in every way, but it gives a voice in its approach, and it gives a style through it. And I think I haven't seen the movie, so I don't want to speak to it as much as you might.
Great movie. You should go watch it if you haven't seen it.
My impression is that they use Marie Antoinette as like a vessel to articulate certain themes and messages, I guess.
Which I guess kind of leads us into the Elvis performance. First thoughts, Zach. Did you like
I loved
it?
Okay. Great. I loved it. Okay. So I'm also going to go on a bold take, which I think...
A bold take? What do we got? What do we got going?
So DJ loves Austin Butler's performance, right?
Yes, he does.
I thought that Jacob dwarfed him dramatically with this, because I thought that his... It's not the same Elvis, which is nice. Different. So there's almost a way that you can't compare the two, but you also have to, because I think that Austin Butler was this very explosive, charismatic entertainer, performer. You know, how is his personality evolving with his ego, and how is the image being shown throughout periods of his life? This one was so intimate and holistic, and it was about his toxicity rippling onto Priscilla and how he was selfish and egotistical. Meanwhile, it was very subtle. You know, his diction was like, his Elvis accent was
crazy.
I mean, he's in Australia.
I know.
And he's doing a perfect.
Well, because I feel like Austin Butler, I mean, so much was talked about with him and his like the dialect that he did for Elvis, and how, like, I guess for like 2 years, Butler ended up getting stuck in that voice because he did it for so long, which like, I'll be honest, like from an acting point of view, that's just ridiculous. It's so over the top. Like you should be able to turn it on and off. And if you're sitting in it for that long, like, bruh.
Did you hear about the difference between the two of them of how they
how Jacob Elordi was like, I've never even heard of Elvis until I saw Lilo and Stitch.
Which is insane. And then you have
crazy.
Austin Butler doing a month-long deep dive on everything
character
about him,
study
method, all of it, and Jacob's like, I
He's
saw
like,
Lilo and Stitch.
yeah, I saw Lilo and Stitch, and that's like the first time that I ever heard of him. Although he did come out and say that he's probably listened to every spoken recorded word of Elvis.
Very
and
cool.
that's how he said, he was like, I just would listen to interviews like on repeat over and over again, and then stare at myself in the mirror and like try to like get the vibe that he gives.
I will also say that there felt like with Jacob's performance, it never felt like an impression, and I felt like with Austin Butler's performance, there were moments where it bled through, and it was very like Las Vegas Elvis, where he was like, oh no, yeah, baby. It was like,
Wait, one more time.
no, oh yeah, but that was kind of what.
Well,
so I'm not in the running for Elvis anytime soon.
So I will say though, Austin Butler did an incredible performance. It was just a different take because I think Elordi's character or take on Elvis was much more of because let's think about it. Okay, Elvis is like this huge like phenomenon, celebrity, huge. He definitely puts on a facade when he was on stage performing versus when he was off stage. Like there's no way that he had the same personality or vibe going on. And so I think Jacob took the take of like, okay, let's do it when Elvis isn't trying to be Elvis. It's when he's finally able to relax and like, or not relax, but like
his home life.
Yeah, like be a normal person kind of.
Yeah.
And I think that he leaned into that really well.
Yeah.
Rather than, I mean, Butler did an incredible job of attacking like the enormity of Elvis.
Right.
But it was
the brand almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Rather than the person.
Yes. I think just because it was so intimate, it gives that look into. I also just like how they really never went on tour with Elvis. The only time he's really getting cameras flashed on him is when they're
together.
Going together. Yeah, and they're in a casino, but it's nothing crazy. And it's nothing like I'm on tour and I'm seeing crowds of people. Even the crowd, there's a shot of him on stage in his signature white costume, and the crowd is dark.
Yeah.
Because it's literally just about him and their relationship with Priscilla. So it's really like... That goes to Coppola's direction too. Is it takes away, it strips the crowd atmosphere away of Elvis, and it's like, this is just about you and me now at the end of the day. So I need you to respect that. And then he comes home from his tours. He's not treating her correctly. He's having affairs. There's a lot of his ego at play, and I think it just became that his ego was so big that he began to push her off in negative ways. Literally calls her little one and treating her like that. That was very sharp dialogue that cut the deepest, I think. And she really surprised a lot of people by like just inserting that at the right time.
She did.
Yeah.
I think it's just so good how Coppola like brought in the toxic dynamics without making it a story about a toxic relationship.
Yes.
Like that wasn't what she was going for, is teaching the audience on like, okay, these are signs of a toxic relationship. It's like, okay, no, we all know what that is. How did it affect actually Priscilla and Elvis? And so one of the things that I first started picking up on it was when she introduced them both taking like pills.
Yeah.
And she wasn't all of a sudden making this about like anti-drugs or like, oh, this is what led to his downfall. It was just kind of like, this is how they started taking them together and like how it was brought in. And also not pinning them like against each other of like, well, Elvis was doing it and Priscilla wasn't. Like it showed like, no, Priscilla was partaking in it too, because they were just told that they needed to take these.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's just not like a topic anymore because Priscilla was like, I think we need to like get rid of them. I think like the pills are a problem. And then that was the end of that conversation, which I love because it's not like Sofia Coppola isn't dragging out these storylines to make them like a big thing. She's like, pills were a problem. Priscilla said, maybe we should stop taking these.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yeah. It's more of a personal relationship.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, we've had a discussion. Like, this is how it happens. A normal, you would think.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not like these like, then she goes on a like it's not these big
she goes and
grand
gets in a car
gestures.
accident and has
like,
an overdose.
Crazy thing.
Yeah. And then it's also, I mean, it's very true to how it happened. I like to imagine at least, but that the same thing with like the books that he's reading.
Yeah.
And they're really,
which I didn't know any of that.
I didn't know that either. And I couldn't even gather everything that he was reading, but what he was talking about was so interesting to him enough to the point where it was another part
Yeah.
that was affecting her. And
Yeah.
she was, but she was also, she didn't have a voice in that necessarily, even though she was like, we have to get rid of these. The only person that gets through to him is his manager, the colonel.
Yeah.
He's like, I want
Tom
you to get rid
Hanks.
of those. Yeah, he's through the bone. Yeah. And he's he goes, oh yeah, the colonel said I should get rid of these. And she's like, I've been
She's
telling
like,
you that.
finally.
Yeah, I've been telling you that.
Thanks for the
Yes.
colonel.
Yeah, thank you for the acknowledgement, Elvis.
Yeah. But again, I think it was a great screenplay because, again, they could have gone down that rabbit hole of like showing Elvis when he's getting involved in these books. Cause I feel like that's not something that's talked about often. So then all of a sudden they could have, like, this could have easily been a 2.5 hour long movie if they started going deep diving into these side storylines. But I think they just did a really nice job of being like, no, this is just a little kernel that we're giving you guys. But at the end of the day, we're going to curve back into the actual relationship and not tell the story of Elvis. We're telling the story of Priscilla, and her life is connected to Elvis and just how she was at home.
Yeah. I think it's about when those little things were happening, the books, the pills. It's about like Elvis also being a repeat offender and how he's selfish and not considering her feelings. So it's about the effects of that on her psychology and how that's going to make somebody feel over time if he just can't answer to that. And he's so dismissive of her at points. And then same thing with women in his life. He has the affair with Anne Margaret. And then he is at a book reading again with a group of girls, and he's deliberately flirting in front of Priscilla and his other band members, right in front of her. And it's another case where she's like, how many times is this going to happen for me to give up or to stay here? Because I can't get through to him on his medicine, his psychology with his reading, literally his affairs. So what am I here for at this point? I have to find my own identity that this man doesn't respect me for who I am. So that was a lot of it. And I think, like you said, it could have delved down a rabbit hole. It could have been a movie just about his affairs.
Yeah, and her spiraling from it. But then I also think like Priscilla is a super inspirational person because rather than letting those affairs totally make her spiral and go into dark places, she just kind of at a certain point was like, okay, like he's just gonna have affair after affair, and I'm just gonna go live my life then, and I'm gonna take care of our children and go do what I need to do rather than waiting for him to show me attention. Yeah,
I agree. There was one interesting quote that I did find from his Elvis's daughter, Lisa Marie Presley.
Yeah, I've heard some like some things that she isn't super happy.
She was, and she passed away before the film came out.
Yeah.
So, but before she passed away, she had very strong opinions about the movie. And there was a quote from her saying about the movie, "My father only comes across as a predator and manipulative. As his daughter, I don't read this and see any of my father in this character. I don't read this and see my mother's perspective of my father. I read this and see your shockingly vengeful and contemptuous perspective, and I don't understand why." And that was what she wrote to Coppola in an email. And Coppola's response was that, "I hope when you see the final film, you will feel differently and understand I'm taking great care in honoring your mother while also presenting your father with sensitivity and complexity." Great response, I think.
I do too.
I think there's a lot that, I mean, it's also your father in the limelight.
Yeah.
I get it. I get the defensiveness and protecting his image and his legacy, but there is a sense of Elvis that needs to be talked about. And that's what Coppola is trying to emphasize with this movie. So
I also feel like if it's talked in the book.
Yes, I agree. If it's in the book,
if your mom put it out there for the world to see, then it's. Although I will say, as somebody that like reads books versus sees films can be a lot heavier to digest sometimes than reading it, because you're visually seeing it happen in front of you, and it can just be a little bit more just visceral to take versus reading it. Yeah, you can kind of glaze over and be like, I'm gonna skip this page. Yeah. And to hear it directly too in the book, I'm sure it didn't make her feel good. No. But it is something that needs to be talked about, I think. And if you're making a movie about their relationship, you have to be honest in that sense too. You can't just
be dismissive to that
Yeah.
huge void that was left with Priscilla of not getting the attention, not getting the affection, not getting respect. I
Yeah.
mean, this is her life at the end of the day. And I think that yes, he was a great performer, great entertainer. He did a lot for music and everything there, but there is a lot of duality behind his complexities. And like Coppola says, presenting your father with sensitivity and complexity. And I don't think that she's trying to say I'm going to make him out to be a bad person, but there are bad things about him.
Yeah.
You know? So.
I also think not as a biopic, like as an actual just storyline for like a regular film, if we're leading up to her leaving him at the end, like we need to see what those reasons are, you know, just as a regular plot point. Like what causes somebody to leave a relationship? There has to be like solid points in order to get somebody there. And I think if they didn't highlight these moments, it would have made no sense. I'm like, okay, why is Priscilla leaving him? Like, he's so amazing. He's everything that the public eye loves. And then all of a sudden it would turn Priscilla into like the bad person for leaving her relationship.
To go off of that, I think if you had her shown leaving, like if you were to cross over the Austin Butler version and this, and she just left,
she would have been,
she's the villain.
Well, it is kind of though. In the Austin Butler one, they're in that car together when he's like struggling, right? Isn't there a scene?
I honestly can't remember that scene.
I'm pretty sure there's a scene where he is like very involved in drugs at this point. He's very overweight and he's sitting in the car with her and she's like about to leave. And like I think she was wearing like sunglasses. I don't even know who played Priscilla in this film.
It was definitely not a big part.
No, but I think they're in the car together, and it's like her being like, "I'm leaving. Take care of yourself. Like we're going somewhere else."
It seemed like when that movie, it was more deriving from his drug use and
rather than his
unhinged
actions
behavior.
Yeah,
and it wasn't how he was actually abusive.
No, it was just that she was sick of dealing with like drugs,
his behavior and everything, and his addictions and
this girl Olivia Dijonay, I wanted to say Dijonay. She's from The Visit is where I know her from.
Oh yeah,
she was like a random part. She did good. Even though you don't remember the scene.
I don't remember the
But anyways, I feel like it would have been like, I feel like people could turn this to totally be like, Priscilla left him, like he's like, why would she do that? She knew what she was getting into in the beginning. But again,
she's very victim blaming.
This girl is 14 years old. She doesn't know what the hell she's doing.
No,
like she's just hard-eyed and like, oh my god, Elvis, yes.
Exactly.
And then as she got older and started to see what was happening, and I also feel like the change really, at least for me, they emphasized it, that it was the moment that they had a child together that she was like,
oh my gosh,
I can't help this man.
And
I cannot help you.
That was another point. I think there's like kind of how you were saying with the structure of certain scenes where it just cuts off and that's the end of that conversation. Then another one comes up. So that was another big final factor for her, I think, was when she is having a child that she's not necessarily ready for, and then she's pretty deep into her pregnancy, and then he's like, oh, I'm thinking of leaving you.
We need time away from each other. And she's like, what?
Do you see me right now?
Well, and I think that was the moment that I was talking about before when she just was like, he's gonna cheat on me and I can't do anything about it. And when he was like, I think that like we need space, you need to leave. And she just said, I think she said, just tell me when to go, and walked out. And then he was like, wait, no.
He's like, wait a minute.
No.
He's like, hold on, baby. Hold on. He's like, wait a minute. So
and I think that was a change for her of like, it's not about me anymore and it's not about you. It's now about this child that I don't know how to bring this kid into the world, but I'm going to do it anyways. So if you want to cheat, go cheat.
Yeah. I'm going to at least try and raise my kid the best I can. And I think that was a great message. But yeah, same thing. A lot of factors that just compound over time, and she just gets sick of it.
Yeah.
So another thing that really worked for us in this film was the production value of the piece.
Woo, woo.
So immersive. I mean, it was beautiful. Yeah, they recreated the 60s. They recreated Graceland, just how we are living in this environment with Elvis and Priscilla. I thought they did a fantastic job with that. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, just the opening like shots of her walking on like the carpet.
Yeah.
I was like, let's go. This is so good. I just think Coppola does a really great job of capturing like feminine youth, and especially in her shots. I don't know anybody else that it makes them look so fun and make you kind of think back on your own childhood of like, oh my God, like you're right. It gives you like that nostalgic melancholy feeling kind of.
Yeah. Yeah. I thought there was, she's also, the design is really important to the film too, because it's so mystic and fantastical at points in the beginning where she's coming into this is the hugest entertainer on the planet, and he's now my boyfriend, and I get to be in his world. So she's immersed in this really castle like arena and environment. And she goes to Graceland. She sees how beautiful his home is. She sees the people that he hangs out with, and she's touring with him, or not touring with him, but she's at least visiting places with him and seeing how luxurious he lives. So any girl at 14 or anyone who's a fan of Elvis is going to be swooned over and just, oh, this is great. I can't imagine anything else. And then as the story progresses and as her maturity progresses, she just kind of descends into a little bit of muted tones with even the color of the movie. There's the bedroom I was reading about was a little bit darker and little mysterious, because what really happens in the bedroom with them, and just the demeanor that he puts off as her as this is my domain. This is my place. I want you to know that. And you're here because of me kind of.
Yep. And you don't get to go do things unless I say that it's okay for you to do it.
And same thing with the wardrobe too. There was the one scene where he's picking out her outfits.
I know.
That was intense.
I know.
Yeah.
I also think, I mean, it wasn't a huge budget. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Let's look up the budget real fast.
I heard it wasn't. I could be wrong.
They shot the movie in Toronto. Graceland. While you're looking for the budget, I'm just going to go over it. Okay. But Graceland was recreated in a soundstage. In an interview with the production designer, she also went on to say that the ceilings of Graceland were enhanced to accommodate for Jacob Elordi's height, which I thought was really funny. So they wanted to go period accurate, but they also said in the interview that they took elements of Graceland that spoke to us and that felt right for us, and that felt right for Priscilla's story, and magnified those in a sense. So we're not making a documentary, and we allowed our poetic vision of Priscilla's memories to be the guiding principle of the movie. And you see that in a lot of pastel tones. You see that in a little bit of the nice cars, the tapestries, like everything was period accurate, but it wasn't this overbearing
gaudy like shiny Elvis that you envision,
the polished version.
So it looks like the budget was 20 million,
which is low nowadays.
It's low nowadays, and especially for having to build a set, that's actually pretty low. And so I think one of the great that now that I'm like thinking back on all the production, I think Sofia Coppola did a great choice on keeping very tight shots.
Yeah.
Because she wasn't doing these huge like pans of like showing the home and showing the property. Instead, she was showing just like kind of quick snippets and like close-ups. I feel like they were always very close to everybody's face. I mean, you kind of have to do that with that height difference too. You can't be doing these like whole body shots because Jacob
the size difference is drastic.
The size difference is crazy. But I think they did just a nice job of working with that budget and making it seem like it looks like they had a higher budget.
Yeah, and I think because you have a lower budget, when they're choosing to do an intimate piece at most of the home life and not always the traveling, the crowds, we don't have to make period streets. Like we don't have to make all these huge, colorful environments that are the 60s. It's really just the home life. It's really just a few casinos, intimate things that they could focus on and stylistically enhance the story. So that was really good.
So like the Elvis movie had an $85 million budget.
Okay.
So like,
wow. I thought it would actually be north of 100, to be honest.
Really?
Just more of what they had to accomplish with that. There's like 300 or 400 scenes in that. Like,
maybe.
I don't know.
Yeah, true.
Just thinking about it off the top of my head. Yeah.
But yeah. One of my favorite shots now that I'm thinking about them is the wedding
and Priscilla.
Yeah, and Priscilla when they're just like recreate. I just guarantee that they were all like, wow, I love this picture of them at their wedding. Let's recreate this and like make it not story-wise important, but aesthetically and like production wise, let's just throw it in there.
And they shot a little bit on film and they made this very home video style to some of those things, especially the wedding. I really like that. And everything just felt very naturalistic to the time period. But like we were saying, they used elements to enhance the environment that she's in. Yeah. So
well,
really appreciated that.
Very good things to say about this. Is there anything that you were disliking or wish that they had talked about or shown?
I think overall, I think it was a great movie. I think that there was a couple scenes that were short, not like what we were talking about of issues, and then they moved on to that. Like more of the presentation of the scene itself. Like there was the one scene with the chair that he threw at the wall near her. Yeah. And they were recording, or he was asking her opinion of a song.
Yeah. He was like, I hate all this music. I hate everything they're giving me. What do you think, Priscilla? And she's like, yeah, it's not my favorite. And then he throws a chair at her.
And it just ended. And it was so explosive. That was the only moment of the film where he was so over the top and you think he's going to physically abuse her, that it did feel like it swept the rug out from under us. Just at the end of the scene, because it ended.
Yeah, it ended very abruptly. Like, I almost wish that they had just shown her, like, I wish either one of them had walked out the room. Like, did he storm out of the room, or did she walk out slowly? Right. And like, if he walked out, then she must have had a moment with the people that were actually in the room and saw that. Or if she walked out, like, did he get upset that she then stormed out? Like, I wish there's more that they could have built on that. A little
moment after, yeah.
But I wonder if in the book it just ends with he threw a chair at me.
Yeah, it could be the case.
It could be that.
Yeah. So, but that wasn't like a make or break scene for me. It was
but it's definitely something that takes you out a little bit in the moment of being like, ooh, that was a very hard cut.
It was. Yeah. It was a little bit jarring for it to just end, because it was such a huge moment. I thought it was gonna be one of the breaking points for her where, okay, no, you can't treat me like this. I thought there was gonna be a major conversation after that. And then I think another scene, I don't know if it's in the book, so a lot of our knowledge of the book is up in the air, but I think that his death at the end, I wonder how that affected Priscilla, or the end of his life, and what she was feeling through that, whether it was total grief, whether it was a little bit of confusion or a little bit of relief. Like, I wonder, obviously she's very sad that he passed away the way that he did, but was there a sense of relief in her? And I don't know if that's in the book, but if that was in the movie. I don't know either.
Maybe she just, maybe she wants to keep some things private too. Yeah. Of like how she responded to that.
That's true.
Yeah, I'm kind of the other way on the film. I kind of wish they gave a little bit more insight into her life before she met Elvis. I feel like right from the beginning, it was like, she's meeting Elvis, everyone. She's getting invited to a party and he's going to be there. And I wish that we could have just seen a little bit more of her family life on how she was before she met him. But then also at the same time, she's only 14. So it's like, what are you going to show us of like a young girl kind of like having to go to school even though she doesn't want to? Like, I don't know what they would show us. But it could have been like a nice contrast just to see the full change that he actually like made on her life.
Yeah.
And then I also think it dips a little bit for me right before the ending. There was a moment where it starts to get a little muddy. Just kind of like there was a moment where I was like, okay, so how are we wrapping this up? Like, is it going to be an overall like lesson, or is it just going to be, and that was the story, everyone? Like, I'm not giving you a grand ending. I'm not giving you a happy ending. I'm not giving you a sad one. I'm just going to end it. And then, so I feel like they kind of were getting lost for a second there because they kept wanting to show more facts that happened.
Yeah.
Rather than, like, there wasn't really any big arc. It was just kind of
just ended.
Just end. Like, let's
just dropped off.
Let's just end it. Let's get Priscilla's leaving him.
Yeah. I think that's kind of what goes hand in hand with her other movies. Is it just has a sharp ending.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, am I satisfied with the ending? Kind of, because it was a very strong ending for Priscilla's character of saying like she finally took control of her life. I think the thing is though, I knew she was going to leave him, so I knew where we were going. Right. Yeah. And I wonder, and like I feel like I didn't know this much about their lives until I watched the other Elvis movie. Okay. So I wonder if I would have appreciated this ending more if I hadn't just seen like a year ago another film about his life. Yeah. Yeah, and that's another thing I think you wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. Was 2 Elvis movies coming out this close. I mean, when I first saw this movie advertised, that was my first reaction. Yeah, like why? We just saw an Elvis movie. Can we let it sit for a little bit? I don't know what the appeal is to just Elvis's stories, but this movie I thought definitely did a justice in Priscilla's story, so I was pleasantly surprised. But yeah, do you think it had an effect of having one right after the other? I think a little bit for me, like I just said on the ending. I think if I had not seen the other one, I wouldn't have really been aware of like how it ends for them. Like I wouldn't have known that they got divorced. I would have been kind of like, okay, I know he dies, but like, are they together still, or like what's going on? And so I think it would have been a little bit more empowering to me watching her walk away from him. And that's kind of what I was waiting for, was like a shoe to drop. That was a surprising shoe to drop almost. Yeah. I mean, also production takes so long. So like, who knows? Maybe the Priscilla film was started before the Elvis film even started production. And then all of a sudden they got their editing done faster. I mean, there's so much that goes into the films. Like, we don't know what happened, but I guarantee Coppola was probably like, shit when she saw the other Elvis movie coming out. Because I think that's what a lot of people were like, why are we telling another Elvis story? Yeah. But I mean, I prefer Priscilla.
I was definitely glad. Yeah, I also prefer
Priscilla.
I think it's also refreshing that it was from Priscilla's perspective. A lot of stuff that we didn't know. Yeah. And then, you know, if we got another just Jacob Elordi driving an Elvis movie immediately after Austin Butler's, it would have been
so weird.
Too repetitive. And then you're just constantly evaluating each of their performances the whole time. This one is obviously, he doesn't have as much screen time as Butler. Yeah. But he utilizes every second he can and in showing that other side of Elvis. So having it about Priscilla, super refreshing.
I agree.
I think it was great. But
I agree. I think, I mean, it's hard to do these films about these huge, like, celebrity entities. I mean, I remember the, like, Marilyn film from last year. Oh my God. Got, like, a lot of heat because people were like, why do we need to tell this story again? Like, please let the woman's story just, like, rest. Yeah. And I think it does come into question of like, why do we feel the need to just keep like reiterating these people's story? Yeah. And what? Because you think you're going to give a new spin to their lives. And I actually am glad that finally it wasn't Elvis's story being told. It was somebody that's connected to him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And it gives you a deeper look into Elvis and then the individuals around him. So a lot about Priscilla that we didn't know. But another one of your notes I have here is that you thought the middle section is way better than the beginning and the ending. Is that along with your other point?
Well, kind of. Okay, so like
Yeah.
in the way that I'm saying that is I feel like the beginning for me, it was a little bit like they threw you in right away with the story, but I was still kind of getting I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It was just a little fast paced, I feel like, while they could have told a little bit more of her backstory. And then I thought like the middle as in the actual story of like the vignettes kind of it almost was of like their moments I thought was just more interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Than like the dynamics between them.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree because the nuanced feeling of their relationship was so present. And then you could feel like just how she was growing further apart from him over time. And yeah, that is the meat and potatoes of the movie.
Yeah,
like,
is the middle.
Yeah.
Which I feel like sometimes it's not that. Sometimes it's like, ooh, what a great start. And then the ending, oh my
God. It
God.
loses steam.
Yeah, it loses steam. And instead, I feel like this story kind of was like, it started off quick. It like got you in. And then it really was just like up, down, up, down, up, down all the way. Yeah. And then like the last like 5 minutes for me, I was kind of like, are we wrapping up soon?
Yeah,
or like where are we going with this? And then it was like, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
And then the ending shot was really beautiful. I liked the ending
liked
shot
it too.
of her in the car.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I liked it too. And it like to go along with what you're saying about the story structure, it does feel like a memoir. It just goes one event to the next, and some of them are more explosive than others.
Yeah.
And more interesting than others. And then it does end. So it does end like a novel. And I think a lot of moviegoers might not be happy with that necessarily because it just
a lot of like ends. Like big film people might, or not big film, but I mean like blockbuster film people might be like, oh, wasn't that entertaining?
Yeah. Well, and I feel like they also do that with Austin Butler's Elvis movie a little bit.
Yeah.
They made a climax of that with his relationship with Tom Hanks and him kind of standing up for himself, which is like it was okay, but I think
that's probably not how it happened in real life, like to a T.
And it wasn't as dramatic as I think they wanted it to be. So this was kind of just, here are the facts, here are the events. We're choosing to use these, and then it ends.
Yeah.
And also, obviously, Priscilla had a life after she left Elvis.
Yeah.
But they chose to end it there. So I thought that was kind of bittersweet. And this was what living with Elvis was like.
Yep.
Here's when I met him. Here's when I left him.
Living with Elvis.
So,
what a name.
Living with Elvis. Well, the book, Elvis and Me. Yeah. So do you have any other critiques before we do final scores?
I don't think so. I think those are right. I mean, very small critiques. Overall, I think it's a great film. I loved it. It's so beautiful to watch. And no, I don't have any other critiques. Do you?
I don't think so. I thought the film was really good. I really can't find problems really with it.
No, it's just more of things that like I wish this would have happened.
Yeah, it was the entertainment factor of it and how invested I was at points. Like there were some points where it was I don't want to say slow. I just think it was,
There's just a few moments where you're like, what's the purpose of
this
scene?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong. I can fully appreciate some scenes that don't have an actual purpose to them. It's more just to keep, like give you a vibe of like what's happening or like keep the energy. But I think there were a few scenes towards the end that I was like, why? What is this leading to? Like, where are we going?
Yeah, I think it doesn't have, like we were talking about, it doesn't have that climactic.
There's not a lot of momentum.
Build. Yeah, it doesn't have a momentum. It has events that build layers to their relationship and to them individually.
Yeah.
So I think it's a pretty character-driven piece for that reason. So if you're going into it thinking that it has some drama
really high
payoff,
stakes
yeah,
yeah,
it probably won't do that for you. I think
No.
it's just always observing their relationship from afar. I think
Yeah.
that's kind of what it boils down to. So with that, I'm going to give this like an 8.5 out of 10.
Oh, wow. That's lower than
yeah.
I thought you were going to go, Zach.
Lower?
That's lower.
Yeah. I'm just trying to think. Like, I thought it was
Because I'm between 9.5.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
one of my favorites. I think this
Yeah.
is my third favorite.
Of Coppola's.
No, of like all year.
Oh, of the year.
Of the
okay.
year.
Yeah. I would definitely put this high.
I'll do a 9.2.
9.2.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yeah, this
pressuring me.
isn't my favorite of the year because I saw All of Us Strangers and
Past lives.
past that. Oh, you're right.
Did it fall out of the 3 now?
No, you're right. It's All of Us Strangers. I think Past Lives beat Priscilla a little bit for me.
Sure. That's a good one.
Priscilla and then Barbie, obviously.
And Barbie.
Barbie was chef's kiss to me.
All relationship movies. This is good. I mean, Ken's relationship is probably the best. No, I'm kidding.
It was though. Honestly, I
yeah.
loved his performance.
Yes. Yeah. I just mean compared to all the other love stories listed. But yeah. So
So are you sticking with 8.5?
I'll give it a 9.
Give
I'll
it a
give it a
9.
9.
Give it a
Yeah,
9.
I'll
Give it a good
9.
score.
I'll
Come on.
change my letterbox review.
Oh, please do. Sometimes I do that. Sometimes I come out and
Yeah.
I'm like, done. And then like
Yeah.
a day later, I'm like, wait, why did
I'm
I
like,
give them that score?
Yeah, and then it sits with you for a little bit,
Yep.
and then you're like, no, it actually was good. And if I can't find issues with it, and sometimes you always compare it to others, and then it's like you can't really always do that
Yeah.
unless it's a direct same story, I think. But-
Or sometimes you get out of something and you're like, that was great. And then as you think about it, you're like, no, you're like, wait, actually, there's things that wasn't that good.
yeah, or everyone loves it, and you're like, that was
Yeah,
just
everyone loves it, and
garbage.
you're like, oh well, yeah. By the way,
Yeah, and that's kind of, well, at least we're on the same field with this movie, so that's kind
I
of.
love Priscilla. Everyone, you should go see it. It's in theaters now. It's also not that long of a runtime. I think it's an hour 50 minutes, so way better than
Killers of the Flower
Killers
Moon
of the Flower
runtime.
Moon
Yeah,
runtime.
yeah, definitely. It's a very safe pick to go to the theater
Yeah, it's
for.
good.
So
It's fun. It's a good time.
yeah, but that being said, I think we're gonna sign off here, and that'll do it for us on this episode of the Cinema Wave podcast. Just covering Priscilla again. Stay tuned for more episodes coming soon. You be sure to subscribe to our Culture Wave Media Network page on YouTube. Our Instagram you can follow. Cinema Wave Media is on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. So just be sure to follow those. Our handle is underneath. And I'm Zach Miller.
I am Liz Tico.
I caught her by surprise again.
You did.
And that's our outro. And I aced that one compared to our intro. So, all right. That's wrapping up. We'll catch you guys next time.